So welcome to another edition of All Things Aviation. My name is Vince Mickens, and we have another great show. This will be our fourth, so we're a month in with this new initiative with the Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation. A couple of acknowledgments. The Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation, the president is Tracy Forrest. The chairman of the board is Michael Harmon. And I also know that some of the other board members are watching. I'm hearing a really weird sound. I'm actually getting really bad feedback. Anyhow, so I'll just turn my volume down a little bit and figure out what's going on with that. But so welcome to the show. The whole point of this initiative is to talk with young aviation professionals like the two young gentlemen we have on today about their career path, their goals in aviation, but also to talk to them about options that are out there. So every week we definitely will probably have a pilot, but we also have people from other aspects of the industry to talk about their perspective, um, and how they got to where they are, because we have all found in our conversations that no matter what our passion and our goals are in aviation, usually it's a path that we didn't totally anticipate. Even if we had it kind of set in our mind in the early stages, we find that we zig and we zag and all of those kind of things. So this is a great platform for providing that opportunity. And plus, we have a lot of young people that are either high school or middle school age that are thinking about aviation and want to know more about the industry, and also again the opportunity and the possibilities. So those are some of the things that we actually are looking at. As you can probably see on your screen, that we have a great set of guests again, and I'm going to grab my, there we go. I'm going to grab my information here then, and I was just talking about this before when we were sometimes when I go live, everything wants to do its own thing, not in accordance with the way I originally set it up, and that's what it's doing right now. Okay, so now that I've gotten things back in order, let me go ahead and move forward with trying to make this look as smooth as possible. Kind of like, every approach to the runway can always have a little bit of a surprise for you. Okay. So first I'll introduce the two young gentlemen that are on the broadcast with us today. First I'll introduce Andreas Ladvinka. I knew I was going to do that. Ladvinka. Andreas is a 2019 graduate last year from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, Prescott. And we'll learn a little bit more about what he's been doing since then, and what his goals are in aviation. And then we also have Jacob Cook, who just graduated. He's from the Daytona Beach campus of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. It's important to point out that both of them are recipients of the Bob Hoover Presidential Scholarship, uh, which was provided on behalf of the Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation, along with the Citation Jet Pilots Association. For those of you who don't know, the Citation Jet Pilots Association, they're a group of citation jet owners, who get together regularly to discuss safety and new features about the aircraft, et cetera, and so forth. And it's almost a bit of a club, as are with most of the aircraft that are manufactured. Some of the other manufacturers have the same thing. We call them type clubs, and it's a great opportunity for them to network and exchange ideas and thoughts of what's going on in that type of thing. So it's great to have these guys, and we'll hear more about their backgrounds and their goals. As far as our distinguished panel of guests, we have Young Park. She's a chief executive officer of First Chime, which is a private aviation, a corporate aviation catering company. She's had an interesting path to get there, and she didn't go to culinary school. So want to hear more about what she did and how she got to where she is now, and what she has to share with us. We have Nancy Viteri. I think I got that right. Did I get it right, Nancy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. She is lead pilot in command for Executive Jet Management. Executive Jet Management is an aircraft management company that has Part 91 operations and provide other services with related relationship to private and corporate flying. And then we have a guest who we had on earlier in July, Tamara Collum. We brought Tamara back because Tamara has this combined experience that we think is can be very informative in terms of what she did. So she was a flight attendant on Air Force One, and she has a million stories she could share, but then she'd have to shoot you. So, but she did that for a number of years, and she actually retired as an Air Force Master Sergeant, which is impressive in itself. She's now a contract corporate flight attendant, but she also is a certified international business and etiquette consultant and is certified in crew resource management. So welcome everybody to the program.
Hello. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So it's great to have everybody here today, and we want to do what we've done on previous shows, and that is really see if we can help Jacob and Andreas out with their direction that they wanted to go in their careers. We were talking a little bit before the broadcast, and Andreas, you had some thoughts and questions about what you're going to be doing. What could you first tell us a little bit about your school background and what you're currently doing?
So, very nice to be on the show, and I'm very honored to be invited to be part of one of the guests. So my background is I started going to Embry-Riddle in Prescott 2016. I didn't have any flight experience at all, came in with 0 hours. I worked my way through the college. I was a little bit ahead of my credits. I should have graduated this year, but I graduated a little earlier. Once I finished school, I had my commercial multi. So commercial license, instrument rating, and then also fly multi-engine airplanes. And then afterwards, I decided to build some hours. The best route would be to become a certified flight instructor. So I went back home to Reno, Nevada, where I worked on my flight instructor certificate. And then COVID-19 hit, and that kind of delayed some things. So I was supposed to finish around April, but it happened in June instead, which I'm still grateful for to even have the certificate. And now I've just been hired at Embry-Riddle in Prescott to be an instructor pilot. So I'll be teaching new students, for right now, just private students. And I'm looking forward to building some hours, teaching students how to fly. And the ultimate goal is just to get into the airlines. I'm also in a cadet program myself with SkyWest. So working with them to hopefully get a job there eventually.
Good. Did you have a question for any of our guests?
Yes. So my first question is kind of relating to the whole coronavirus time, since the aviation industry goes up and down all the time with 9/11 and the recession in the 2000s. What would you, just kind of open floor to anyone, what would you recommend for us young aviators going into the industry, how to deal with these crises that happen throughout our lifetime and how to keep yourself composed without thinking everything's just falling beneath your feet?
Well, if I might answer that first, Andres, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly. This is Nancy. I've been fortunate to be in the aviation industry a long time, and I've had a lot of ups and downs in my personal career. I was in the military for 20 years, and in the last 16 years, I've been a corporate pilot, and I've been through a significant number of jobs as a corporate pilot, largely due to flight departments closing, unrelated to some of the events you spoke about, an owner selling an airplane, those kinds of things. And I found myself on many occasions having to pivot and come up with a new plan. And interestingly enough, it always seems to work out. You always meet someone who's out there to help you on your journey. And, you know, particularly in this time, I think the thing that most of us can do if flying is down a little bit and you're not getting out there is to stay as current as you can, staying in the books. I'm personally flying a Challenger 300 right now, and I stay in the books and I read things and I keep up on my limits, stations, and those type of things. And also as pilots, we all have to stay in shape and keep our medicals. So I'm a swimmer and no pools are open right now, but I'm out there walking and riding my bike. And I'm a member of NBAA and AOPA. And particularly NBAA has, much like today, I was unaware of the Hoover Foundation webinars, but everyone's doing great webinars. I've been on about 15 of the NBAA webinars since they started, and a variety of current topics and whatnot. So, just keeping in the game and keeping yourself ready, because it'll come back. It always has, and it will.
Yeah, I think that's great advice that you're giving about staying in the game and being involved in a lot of things. Being a member, and you can have a student membership for MBAA as well as for AOPA. And both of those organizations provide a lot of information of what's going on in the industry, what's pertinent, what's important for your career. Uh, and it's just good to be in the know. At the same time, we've talked about it before. It's a really good thing to go to as many events as you possibly can. We've had some of the previous scholarship winners talk about how they went to Oshkosh for the first time, or they went to an MBAA convention for the first time, and how much they learned from that. So yes, absolutely. Nancy, while we have you, you've had quite the background. I know I always say that because all of you guys have, but every time I get a chance to meet somebody like yourself and learn more about your background, I'm just amazed at all of the things that you've done. Can you give us a quick synopsis of what you've done in terms of your aviation career? How did you get started?
Oh, sure, absolutely, Vince. I started out, as I mentioned yesterday, we were doing a little chatting, that my father worked for Grumman on Long Island, and that's where I grew up. And so I was always around aviation, but did not know that I could be a pilot. It just wasn't one of those things that popped up. But he worked on the Lunar Module program and the F-14 program, so we were always around aviation. And I planned to study chemical engineering in college. And a couple of the schools I applied to had Air Force ROTC, and I thought that might be a great way to go to college, to serve in the military. We were a big military family as well. And I went to Manhattan College in New York City, went on an Air Force ROTC scholarship for engineering, but then I received a pilot slot to go to pilot training in the Air Force, and I didn't know that it was an option for me, and I decided it'd be a lot of fun and I would do it. And it turned out to be the greatest thing, probably the best decision I've made in my life. I did not plan to stay in the military for 20 years, but I was having so much fun. I stayed in. I flew KC-135s, and I flew out of Andrews Air Force Base, where Tamara was as well, flying Gulfstream aircraft. And then after retiring after 20 years, I moved on to be a corporate pilot, and I've flown in many corporate flight operations, mostly at Dulles Airport. And I've just had a great time flying around the world and working with the great people that we have in the aviation industry.
Yeah, some people automatically think that if you're in the military, that you're going to probably transition to the airlines. And in many cases, that's true. But you just showed a track where you went from flying a KC-130 Hercules to switching to Gulfstreams, which then led to you flying in corporate aviation after you got out. Would you agree that that path wasn't something you expected, but went that direction anyhow?
Oh, absolutely. And I have to make one correction, Vince. I was in the Air Force, so it was a KC-135 Stratotanker, which is
Sorry.
similar to the, that's okay. I would have loved to fly
Busted.
the 130 version as well. But yes, getting to fly a Gulfstream in the Air Force was wonderful. And since we did our training with fellow business pilots, we get some exposure to the business aviation world. So there's a great opportunity there to move into business aviation versus necessarily going to the airlines. So it was great flying Gulfstreams. It was a terrific mission, and had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, Jacob, we were talking to you earlier, and you're on a track for flying, but you have also been looking at other options because of COVID-19 and that type of thing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and what you're thinking of?
Yes, sir. Yep. So I recently graduated in May with all my flight ratings. I was supposed to be ready to be flight instructing at school, but unfortunately, because of the COVID pandemic, I haven't quite been able to start teaching or get a job flight instructing. So I'm actually home back in New York, and I'm looking at. I'm going to stay current on my flying, but I'm also going to try to diversify my background and have a little bit of a backup plan. So I'm actually looking to working with my dad and learning a little bit about electrical and kind of mechanical side of almost a little bit of engineering, just to diversify and have something on my resume. So if flying doesn't work out someday, I lose my medical, I have something to fall back on, just another realm of knowledge.
Yep. And you had a question also for one of our guests?
Yeah, any can answer. So obviously, no one expected any of this to happen back in March. And I had a pretty set schedule in my head for the past 4 years of get my flight instructor ratings before graduation, which I did, and then immediately start working at school. Stay at school while flight instructing at Embry-Riddle for a year or two, however long it takes to get to 1,000 hours, and then you're off to the regional. That's pretty much the typical Embry-Riddle pilot track that they do, and I was on track, and then the pandemic hit. And now I'm kind of in this haze of confusion and not sure of what's going to happen, or my plans are obviously changing. And I know Nancy specifically started with a chemical engineering degree and then has this awesome decorated flying career. So I'm just wondering along the way of how did you adapt to the change and kind of see the bright side and staying motivated on your goals, but your goals are changing and that's just a hard time. So I'm just looking for any advice or what you did. And obviously it worked out for you. So congratulations.
Nancy?
Well,
oh, go ahead.
Very
no,
good to
no.
know.
Nancy, go.
Okay. I know the other ladies have a lot to add
Okay.
too, and probably similar type stories. As I said, all you can do is, keep yourself ready because the opportunities will be there. One of my flight departments, which I loved flying in and had been around for 84 years, was one of the departments that closed unexpectedly after I'd been there a year and a half. And I really thought it was going to last forever, which was probably my first mistake because nothing, things change. But I went and became a contract pilot, similar to Tamara is doing some contract flying now, and we've flown together. I did some safety management work because I also had that skill set from prior jobs. So exactly what you're planning is wonderful. We're all going to have to do what we have to do if we're laid off or we're furloughed or, looking for our first big opportunity. But particularly for you guys, your passion for aviation is not going to go away. So you've got to keep that up. And I know a lot of people who have full-time jobs, but do their instructor flying on the weekends. So that'd be one way you could keep it up if you start doing something else. But don't give up your dreams. Just keep pursuing it. And I think that'll get you where you need to be.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to chime in real quick, if I may. I personally been dealing with COVID-19 since last December. Before I opened a company in US, I had a catering company in Korea, and since December, I've seen that a drastic reduced amount of flight aircraft movements and or catering orders and et cetera, et cetera. And I spent many days, many nights in panic mode. I was afraid of what would happen, that uncertainty and the confusion and the disappointment that just it just hit you all at once. And now I look back, I think the toughest time for me was between 3 to 6 months. So if you've been dealing with COVID-19 since March or April, now is probably the hardest time for you. And this job, being a crew member, it gets in your blood. It just doesn't go away. So what I would like to recommend is to stay close to your mentors. I think that is extremely important that you don't get misguided. You don't get consumed by your own fear or insecurities. Just like Nancy and everybody's recommending, there's a lot of great webinars. Keep yourself in loop and it takes a deliberate effort for you to be a part of the game. And I think, and then it gets a little easier. You will get to you come to terms with it, and then you will find your peace. And then from that point, what I did was I set a very short term goal, very short term goal, so that when it gets achieved, you feel some kind of achievement and start feeling positive. And that helped me to get through this time.
Thank you.
I they all have it, and I always agree. I always told the story when I was looking to get out of the Air Force at 10 years, 9/11 happened. And I was like, well, I know what I'm doing now. And I always say, one door closes, 10 open. But aviation, it's in your blood. And you just go through all those doors and you get to your point. Keep your goals there, keep them set. But there's other options. There's flying, like firefighting, what is it, banner towing? I mean, there's so many options, especially where you're at. That just keep talking to everyone, ask questions with everyone you talk to.
Yeah, that's a great point. There are a lot of different types of flying that can be done. Obviously, flight instructing is the most obvious, but the ones you just named as an example, Tamara, are also great for people to keep in mind. The common denominator of question that we get often, though, and maybe any of you can expand on that for these two young gentlemen, and one of them alluded to it a little bit earlier, is they're like, okay, you've done what you've done and you've been successful with it and everything. I'm at the very beginning stages of this. And now I've been thrown, a wrench has been thrown in it with the situation with COVID-19. What are the things that these young gentlemen can be doing actively, even with the restriction that is currently taking place, to further their career? Nancy, you did touch on it about reading publications, and I'd like to mention one. Aviation International News, AIN, is a really great publication to know what's going on in the industry. Obviously, if you want to expand it into things like aerospace, then Aviation Week and Technology is also really good too. But any of those publications are key to staying up with what's going on, and there's a lot of different ways to access that information. And as a student or fresh out of college, they offer special, sometimes they're free or sometimes it's a discount. I know Aviation International, you can get it for free online. All you have to do is register with them. So things like that, I think, are really key.
And I can help you if it makes you feel better. I've not flown since March 16th because most of my accounts they're not flying right now, or they're not using contracts. And a lot of them said, we're not going to use any contract flight attendants till next year. So I've been focusing on the training side of it because my passion is training and mentorship. But I've also been focusing on, how can I improve within myself, and share with others to get through it. So definitely, I keep up social media. It's not always my favorite avenue, but there are a lot of aviation, aviation hiring, or people out there communicating what's going on or their jobs available on there. And so I read up on that to just keep track of whatever other people are doing. And then with my friends, I created Cooking with Letters when COVID started, because I'm home and all of a sudden I'm having to cook food because I'm not going out to eat. And it kept us connected and just improve on my techniques, but on a health check for everybody else too. So I just creative thinking, trying to find ways and meet people and network still amongst COVID.
Yeah, I think talking amongst you and your friends and your peers, they can be another great outlet for you to not only exchange the current affairs and informations, but to support each other. Just to unload and share the similar feelings you may have at this time. Sometimes just to let it out and just talk to your friends, it helps a lot. I do agree with you, Tamara.
Young, give us a day in the life of catering. How does that start with from you when you get the order, say for a corporate flight, and how do you proceed from there?
Well, usually it has changed a little bit. Usually, most clientele they already know what they would like, and our job is to make it happen. So we do a lot of catering companies have menu, but there's more of a reference. These are available, but the clients almost 100 times they will order what they will like. So being
Does that
able,
vary a lot?
huh?
Does it vary a lot, their order, or are there
Oh
certain
yeah,
things?
yeah. Sometimes we'll have orders that comes in with the recipe because they would like you to make that from scratch.
They
And
will
I have,
send you a recipe?
oh yeah, and the picture, like picture of the food. One time I had
Oh my
a
gosh.
clientele. One time I had a client who asked for African sauce. I've never heard of it. I don't know what it is, but I had to make it. So it can be very challenging if you're coming from the restaurant business or some kind of established eating facilities where they're okay. This is what's available, and that's all you get. It is very different, but it's fun. It's fun. You get to expand your knowledge. So usually they will place an order via email or text, and then they would proceed. And they will let us know what time they would like it to be delivered, if there's any food allergies or any special requests like dietary restrictions. So we create a meal just for that flight. But lately, ever since the COVID started, I did get a request. Before they place an order, they will ask, "What is your protocol for COVID-19? How many
Right.
staff?
That's a
Yeah, how
good
many
point.
staff are working? Yeah, working in the kitchen. Are you licensed? They have your past HACCP
Do you
inspection."
wear a mask? Yeah.
Yeah, so everybody's aware of it. It can be a tricky business to begin with because we have to take care of the food safety before anything. Now, on top of it, we have to add this COVID-19 health protocol. So a lot of companies are working with minimum staff just to avoid any unknown person coming in and handle the food. And another change that I notice is everybody asks for individually packed food. Because sometimes when you have 8 passengers, it's easier for the pilots or flight attendants to just have it
Right.
in one tray. Now there are a lot of requests saying I would like everything to be packed individual. So one time I had a request. There was 20 boiled eggs, and she wanted it cut in half, individually wrapped. And then I was like, okay, I can do that. And then she sent me another email and said, oh, by the way, can you make it pretty? So I had to put a bow on everything. That took a lot of time, but at least people are conscious about it. And then once everything is done, we have a very strict regulation as to how we deliver the food. The
Right.
temperature has to be maintained in a cold storage temperature uh, by regulated by the local health department. So we deliver it, and as soon as we get to the FBO, we put it in the refrigerator. And from that point, usually a lot of flight crew will order food maybe an hour prior to their show time or on their show time because they still have some hours.
So a critical aspect of it is coordinating with operations, coordinating with the pilot. And you've dealt with both sides, with the airline and with corporate aviation. What advice would you, and I'll ask you to chime in with that too, Tamara and Nancy. What advice would you guys have for Jacob and Andreas about when they become a professional pilot, they become a corporate or an airline pilot? Um, what advice would you give them as pilots as to how to address things like a catering?
Well, I spent years in the commercial aviation. So the significant difference when it comes to catering between the corporate aviation and commercial is in commercial airlines, every flight has a set catering menu. So if you're going from, let's say, Washington dollars to New York, you may not get anything because it's only like 40-minute flight. But
Right.
if you're going to San Francisco or LA from Dallas, then per month they have a set menu. Okay, first class gets this, coach gets this, and the cruise, your option is this, this, this. So it's usually chicken, of course, beef or vegetarian, and you get to choose. And you don't
Right.
get that notice in advance. You will find out when you come on board. So usually your flight attendant will tell you, okay, today's menu is this. Which one would you like? And then they start fight because they both want the same thing. No, they don't. But that's how the
You're joking, but that probably does happen from time to time.
that's how usually commercial aviations arrange their crew meal. And the portion is different. It's an airline portion. Whereas in corporate aviation, a lot of times for Part 91 operators, crew member will have a choice of what they would like to have. It just has to meet certain budget because it is never good to waste money, no matter whose money it is. So most of crew members are very aware of it, and even the corporate aviation, we do have a set crew meal. But a lot of times, if you will just say, hey, I would like this one, but this is for crew, then a lot of times they will give you a slight discount because it's for the crew member.
Yeah. Nancy, speaking of crew, how about your perspective on catering and how it affects pilots?
Well, catering is so essential, and I do love to eat, and it is very important to your ability to fly an airplane to be well fed. So for crew members, whether we order the catering ourselves as pilots, whether we're not flying with a flight attendant that day, or we are blessed to have a flight attendant with us who is taking care of the passenger order as well as the crew, it's just a really essential part of flying, particularly in business aviation. As many people probably know or don't know, in business aviation, people really are using their aircraft as a business tool. And they're using it to get to meetings, sometimes in several cities, and they're super busy. And coming aboard and being able to have a great meal that's already on board for them and ready to go is essential. And same thing with the crew. Some of these airplanes that are out there now are very long range, and you might be eating all 3 meals of the day on board. So I've seen it done multiple ways. Tamara and I were fortunate enough to fly a trip together last year where she was the flight attendant and took care of everything. And I've been in many operations where as the pilot, we order the food and make sure it's what the passengers want. And I just like to add, listening to Young and Tamara, is a lot of people out there hear the term CRM, crew resource management. And as I was listening to the 2 ladies talk, I thought to myself, one of the things when you do have a flight attendant or even another pilot with you is, the CRM doesn't take place just in the airplane. It takes place before the trip. And when we have a contract flight attendant like Tamara on board, she usually comes out the day before, looks over the aircraft, all the safety items. We go over what the passengers like. And so planning that catering for the trip really does start well in advance, just to make sure it's done perfectly and can be well prepared on board. So it's a very critical part of flying.
It's going to make or break your trip. You can have the best landings, and it could be a 10-day trip, but I'll tell you, it's tested. I test it every time I fly. On a 10-day trip, even the pilots, they only remember your last meal. And that has to be your best meal all the time because nobody else can remember it. But your passengers, it's like us when we go to a hotel or a restaurant or we come home. We like that comfort. We like that familiar feeling. And your customers that get on the plane, they want that same feeling. And you can have the best takeoff and landings. And yes, we're there for safety, but you know what? Those customers want that comfort level too. And when they're showcasing their guest on board and they're doing the business, you got to take in the cultures and everything else that's part of all of that, because that makes or breaks a business deal. If you don't do their T's right or something, you offend something. So there's a lot of intricate parts to that.
And I think this time has changed a little bit of trend because this subject can sound irrelevant to pilots' function, but lately I heard a lot from my pilot friends where they have to go pick up the food because the owner now he doesn't want any flight attendants or any guest. So he's putting all the trust onto the pilot. So you have to go out and source the food, whether it's a restaurant or catering company. So in a harsh time, it's a very unique challenge that pilots may face if they haven't had the chance to put some interest in catering area.
And then they lose sight of the real fact. We're here, a pilot, which Nancy may know, I flew with, they're asking the need of the flight attendant. And I love his theory because he said there's two things as we're crossing the pond or crossing, say we're flying to Europe. He said, if you were to have a heart attack or we are in an emergency, he said, our primary job, and say the owners or customers were to have kids, he goes, our job is to get the plane down safely.
Yeah.
He goes, you want that flight attendant there to help get you down safely and make sure you're secure. He goes, so what would you like? Especially if you were to have kids on board. He goes, let's have that flight attendant on board. So having that third person, however anybody wants to look at it, is just having that extra safety. And a lot of times people don't look at it that way because they're looking at the food, but it's the whole concept of making that's your business, that's your office.
Jacob and Andreas, let me shift gears a little bit and ask either one of or both of you a question. So when you first got into aviation and started going to Embry-Riddle, what was the difference between your initial perspective about the industry and where you are now? Either one of you guys.
I'll go. So when I came to Embry-Riddle, I had 0 flight experience. I took 1 discovery flight somewhere in high school. That's where I kind of confirmed the bug that I wanted to fly. And when I came to Riddle, it was kind of more, they drive a lot of just airline flight instructing to the airlines. And then as I kind of progressed, and especially after getting the Hoover Scholarship and going to these conferences and meeting all these people, I had no idea the amount of things that pilots could do. I mean, if you think about every big company, they need a plane and they need a pilot. The banners getting towed, the crop fields that need crop dusting, it's just a huge laundry list of stuff that pilots need to do. And that kind of opened my eyes. And then into the corporate world, I had a little bit of experience with that. So it kind of shifted from airline to everything. I mean, airplanes are everywhere and aviation is in every business. So there's just an endless amount of things that you can do in aviation.
Andreas, how about you?
For me, the biggest thing, I'm like very goal driven. So I like to have goals done by a certain time. And I learned with aviation, you can't sometimes have that flexibility. Just when I started, I wanted to get each course done by a certain time, and there's aircraft maintenance, there's weather delays, and everything tied up. And I realized, okay, I have to be more flexible about it. I can't say I'm going to finish this course by this date because it probably won't happen. So that's a big thing I learned, and kind of echoing what Jacob said. Going into Embry-Riddle, I was very just thinking about aviation, and the only aspect of aviation is the airlines. So just like Bob Hoover Scholarship and all these different avenues, and people sometimes just have their own airplanes just to fly, which is sometimes forgotten in Embry-Riddle, I feel like, because you're so standardized and do everything by the book sometimes, which is good, but you also need to have that fun aspect. So when I left to do my flight instructor training, I did it outside the Riddle environment, and I did it at FBO, a pretty big one in Reno, Nevada, Atlantic. And the amount of different types of aviation that go in and out of the FBO is crazy. You see small little airplanes for people that just want to go get breakfast sometimes on the weekend, and you have military airplanes. You have Ameriflight, where they're transporting all kinds of medical supplies to military. So there's a lot of different aspects of aviation that I didn't realize, and especially that business aspect. So that's why I'm always keeping my ears open to the corporate side as well. to see if I want to go that route instead of the airlines.
Yeah, you guys bring up a couple of really good points. Variety is one of them. Flexibility. I'm sure that everybody on this call will agree with me that flexibility and aviation go hand in hand. You never quite know what your schedule, how your schedule is going to end up. So you can have things planned out and think that you got a flight tomorrow morning. It's scheduled to depart at 7. You know you're going to go in and pre-flight set everything up, and then you get that call at 6 or 5 in the morning saying, up, not leaving till 9. And by the way, we're not going here, we're going there. And by the way, we're carrying 2 more people, and or we're picking up somebody on the way, and all of those type of things. Nancy, Tamara, Young, I'm sure you guys can all agree with me and chime in about that.
Yes, I think you need to be ready for anything. I could address a little bit what Tamara and I did in the 99th Airlift Squadron at Andrews. Is we did have a aircraft that was always on a standby for any kind of government mission that came down, and a lot of flight departments in the corporate world are like that too.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you don't think you're flying, or you're a charter pilot, maybe a charter comes down, you have to be ready to fly, which kind of ties back in with our earlier conversation about these times now, maybe when you're not flying, is the time to stay in the books and think about flying, to not get rusty. But same thing when you have those standby duties, you have to be ready. You have to have your bag packed. You have to be mentally prepared, for a quick drop down trip. And some of the things that we did in the 99th, I mean, you'd be on your alert duty and you'd get the call to go to Russia in a couple hours. Or one morning I got the call to go to Switzerland in 2 hours. So,
wow.
But you know what, there's nothing more exciting. And if you're mentally ready and you've got your studying done and you're ready to fly the plane, it's easy and it's fun.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Tamara,
see
or-
Yeah. So with Nancy and I see the pilots when they get ready to retire, coming out of the 89th or the military, and you'll see half go into the commercial side and the other half go into business. And what you see is some of them, they're like, I just want to push the throttle up, land, go home. And the others, they're like, I like that challenge. I like that change. Because in the corporate world, you're going to get changes and the challenges. And I agree with them, because you just like to know that you have to be flexible, but you never know. You'll get a new challenge, a new change every day, and it keeps you on your toes. And you can say, yep, I'm in Switzerland. And then we come back and we tell a funny story of like, wow, that was challenging or fun or, unique. And I learned something new.
yeah.
And I think even in the commercial airlines, you do have that unpredictable schedule when you're on reserve. When you're new hire, until your probation period, you will be on reserve. And sometimes you will sit at the airport for 8 hours, and sometimes you're going to Hawaii. But the key point is to have your bag packed and ready to go. So whether it is commercial or corporate, that excitement of going somewhere that you didn't expect, it comes to you. And I think that's the very exhilarating part of this a job, being a crew member, that it's thrown to you and you're like so excited about it, and you just go for it with the excitement.
Yeah, so the common denominator for all of it is to actually be prepared,
Yeah.
and always be prepared, never knowing quite. And that also goes, I think, for you, Andres and Jacob. I think that goes for your careers as you progress towards what you want to do. You never know when you're going to get that phone call or that email or that text saying, "Hey, I want you to come in." Or that in your networking, you run into somebody and they say, "What are you doing?" And you tell them, and they say, "Oh, you know what? Why don't you give me a call Monday and let's talk a little bit more about that." You don't know when those things are going to happen, so preparation is a mainstay.
But you can also, I like to say, Nancy and I have talked before, when you feel like everything's going crazy at home, you just want to get out and fly, because that's the one place in the world you feel it's calm.
I know
But
that's
you guys know.
I completely agree with you. So just imagine, this time will pass one way or another. All the crisis, like 911, financial crisis, it all passed. But I think at the end of a tunnel, what a lot of companies are seeking is somebody who continue to develop themselves during this void time. And everybody will look at the resume and say, oh, 2020, okay, yeah, I understand. And there will be I think they will be the norm, and what you do and which activity in the webinars or
Really
networking they
good advice.
participate, they will speak volume when somebody actually start reviewing your resume and say, wow, this person kept going. I think that will be an important part.
Yeah. Andreas and Jacob, do you guys have, I think each one of you had another question, or maybe it's been answered during this conversation?
Yeah, I had another question for Young, but it kind of got answered. I was just wondering how her operation was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and kind of how she had to alter her onboard service. Because I know I've done a couple commercial flights during the pandemic and they stopped their onboard service or altered it and they do it a little bit different. But you pretty much touched on it pretty well. Individual packaging and wearing masks, and people are already asking about it.
Oh yeah, and another thing is that I mentioned it before, but a lot of aircrafts I don't cater to commercial aviation, so I'm more focused on the Part 91 or charter flights. But um, like I said, I've seen the rise of COVID-19 in China. I had a catering company in Korea, and my main clientele were Chinese clientele. And I saw them just stop flying in the middle of day, and it lasted for about 3 months. And I knew it was inevitable. It will develop to be a pandemic. So that's when the panic set. You're like, oh my God, I had all these plans, but nothing will happen. So I had to think whatever I could think the best at the time. And my solution to my own problem was to open another business during the pandemic, but change the concept of business. So I may not have a company in Korea, but now I have a catering service in Washington D.C. area. But now I have to stay competitive, and I've been flying out of Dulles area in past decades. So I was actually the client of most catering companies. So I changed the concept of business from conventional catering company to private chef service. So now I get to, and it kind of fits the situation because everybody's working with a reduced number of staff, and I only take care of one flight a day or whatever I can handle. But the utmost attention will be applied to each order. So I could sit at home and cry and say, "Oh my God, my life is ruined." But you gotta do what you gotta do. One door closed, another one open. So this may seem like a doomsday to you, but there are a lot of things you can do in the same situation. And sometimes you know yourself best. So you know your talent and the situation that's given to you. As negative as it is, how you turn this negative timeline into positive, there will be a valuable quality all major airlines or any operation will look for.
One of the things that we talk about, thank you very much, Young. One of the things we talk about a lot is we look at things from a domestic U.S. standpoint. But I know that you guys have all had a lot of international experience. Is there any advice that you can share with Andreas and Jacob about flying internationally, or even considering flying for another airline outside of the U.S.?
Oh yes, absolutely. It's been a known fact that there will be a severe shortage of pilot, and this may have a better feedback on this one. But I am in very close. Uh, I have a lot of input in the friends and networks in Asia. It's been a known fact there has been a shortage of pilots in past decade, I believe, and they're always short of pilots, and they welcome the American pilots or European pilots, and they do treat you very well. Those airlines are currently also suffering, but the chances are they will have to come back and rehire some people. It may not the desirable company that you would like to work for, but looking into overseas companies, foreign companies, I may that may be a very good option for you because they do treat the commercial pilots especially they do treat them very well. Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, they seems to be back on their feet already. The progress they made in aviation, especially the corporate aviation, they are making a steady progress. So they are, but then again, they had it 3 months before we had it in States, so they're always going to be 3 months ahead of us. So I would say, yeah, keep your eyes in Asia or Europe or other countries who got over the pandemic relatively well. And if you just see their pattern, I would expect that that will be similar to what we will have in the future as to how we get over this hurdle.
And Nancy, how about you?
Yes, I have a few interesting things I just thought of, Vince, which when you hear other people talk, everything comes to your mind. Yes, before all this, the shortage was looming very large. So once everything gets back on its feet, the shortage will be back and they'll need a lot of pilots. Let's also not forget, because I don't know who's listening, that largely overlooked is the shortage of future mechanics as well. And
Yes.
we cannot fly our airplane without a great mechanic. You just can't do it. So for anyone listening out there, I do know some pilots who also have their A&P, their airframe power license. So that's an option as well. And then another thing I just might throw out for the young gentleman and anyone else listening is I'm not currently sure of what opportunities there might be in guard units or reserve units for part-time positions and those types of things where maybe you're not flying an airplane right now, but you're doing other things related to aviation. So that's another path you can take as well and may lead to being a military guard or reserve pilot or even looking at active duty. So there are a lot of great opportunities out there.
Yeah, no, those are really great points. I think I'm glad you brought up the A&P airframe and power plant mechanic. I actually have talked to a couple of the MROs, the maintenance companies, about that recently. And in fact, we had one. West Star Aviation was on a couple of shows ago, and that was one of the things he brought up. That in spite of what we're dealing with COVID-19, the current situation, within aviation, that as this passes and we start to get back to some form of normal, it will go back up to, and they're actually currently looking for A&P. Yeah, not just them. Really, everybody is. That there's definitely a shortage in a lot of areas of aviation, including besides pilots, A&P, and avionics technicians and things like that. And that's in both commercial and corporate. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes, there's going to be a lot of great opportunities out there, and we'll just have to wait it out a little bit.
Jacob, have you and Andreas, have you guys had conversations at your schools or flight departments, or I mean flight training or whatever, about the various opportunities out there?
For me personally, are you asking about like the school or just among like coworkers?
Either one.
I mean, amongst coworkers and other friends and family, you're always talking about future opportunities. And I've had several friends that went into the airlines right before the pandemic, and they were right in the middle of their training, and they got sent home. So I'm very aware of what's going on with the airlines, with corporate. I haven't spoke to too much with others about it, but just when I was at the FBO in Reno, you could tell the corporate really died off. When I came back in the flight school at the end of April, it was completely dead. And by the time I left here, end of July, it seemed like things were picking back up. So, and the same thing with the airlines as well.
Gotcha. Jacob?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit at school, and I have a couple mentors that I talk to kind of frequently in the airline industry, and then people that I've met at school. I know some people are pursuing other backup careers right now during the pandemic. For example, real estate from a guy from Delta doing other things. But I mean, there's just an endless amount of possibilities out there to keep going. So, like all the panelists said, just one door closes, another one opens. You got to keep your eyes open. So that's kind of what we're doing, and we'll just overcome and adapt and stay flexible and just kind of ride it out and hope it gets better.
Great. Well, this has been a great conversation. We're going to kind of wrap things up, but I'd like to give young Nancy and Tamara an opportunity to make a closing comment about their advice to you guys.
Thank you for having me here today. It was my pleasure, and best luck to you.
Thank you very much, Young. It was great to have you on.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Something, always think, what are your strengths? Find your niche, because you got multiple strengths, and always have a backup plan and look at all your options and take them in consideration and how you can apply them. You'll do great out there.
Yeah, we have an extra minute or so. Tamara, you want to mention again the FAA resources you were talking about at the top of the show?
Oh, yes. So if you just look up FAA courses, there's multiple, but you have air traffic control, avionics mechanic, airport manager, transportation security screener, airfield ops specialist, aeronautical engineer and safety investigations.
Oh,
Any of those.
investigation.
I mean, those are good to know, especially for any type of accidents, to know the processes.
Absolutely. And Nancy?
Yeah, it was great to be with you today and to share experiences and to hear the young graduates talking about their plans and what they're thinking of. I'm sitting here doing a little math thinking, I had my first flight in a Cessna 150 coming up on 38 years ago. And I wouldn't have missed this career for the world. I think there's fantastic people in aviation. It's so high tech, it's so forward looking. It's just a great industry. So stick with it, it'll come back. And like we discussed, always be prepared, be ready to do whatever is asked of you, and always pursue excellence. It is a career that demands nothing less than being perfect and excellent. And I think that's one of the things that's great about it too. Makes it very challenging, as the ladies mentioned earlier, but you've got to do your job perfectly, and that's what you've got to be ready for.
I would like to add a final note to you guys. When 911 happened, I was working at the airline. I was working for American, and you can imagine what happened to me or my friends and to the pilots. It was extremely tough, but I would like you to know your greatest asset is your youth. I was in my 20s. I was in my, I thought the sky was going to fall and I was going to die. But I wish you realize what a great asset you have. You just being you at that age, you'll be able to get over a lot of things. So just, I wish you the best luck.
Thank you very much, Young. So Jacob and Andreas, I hope you guys got some tips out of this today and found value in the information that was shared.
Yeah, thank you, Vince, and thanks to all the panelists for having me on here. This is what it's all about. This is what I love about aviation, all the mentorship and people that are so willing to help the up and comers in aviation. So this is what it's all about, getting people talking. It's how we'll all get through it. So thanks again, Vince, and thanks to everyone for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it was a real pleasure to be on here and to hear all the different aspects of aviation and to continue building that knowledge, and just makes me excited to go out there and get to work and just have fun in life with aviation. And I just appreciate the opportunity.
Well, this has been great to have you guys, Tamara, Young, Nancy. Thank you guys for taking time out of your schedules to share this information and join us on this webcast. Again, this is All Things Aviation, which is brought, on behalf of the Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation. The president is Tracy Forrest, the chairman, Mike Herman, and the board of the board of directors for the foundation. And it's a relatively new initiative, and the goal is to do just what the conversation we had today, which is to provide advice and insight on how to further their careers in terms of these aspiring young aviation professionals, and also encourage those who are watching that may be interested in aviation, what the options are and how you can get started with it and that type of thing. As I mentioned earlier, Jacob and Andreas are two of actually 34 um, Bob Hoover Legacy Presidential Scholarship recipients, and which was provided by the Bob Hoover Legacy Foundation and the Citation Jet Pilots Association. It's a program that we want to continue to expand and provide opportunities for more. Every time we talk to these young professionals, they tell us how valuable it was, not only in receiving the scholarship to help with paying for their education, but also the exposure that they have had to aviation in terms of things like the Citation Jet Pilots Association type club and Oshkosh Air Venture, which was virtual this year, NBAA's annual convention, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that we hope to continue to provide by having a guest, and most importantly, that yes, there are plenty of options to be a pilot, and different types of pilots, whether it's commercial, corporate, humanitarian, et cetera. But there are also so many other things in this industry that are applicable as well. So thank you again, everybody, for watching, and thank you guys for being on the show today. Everybody have a good one.
Thank you.